Hello to any and everybody watching this. If you haven't seen one of these before, this is Conversations with the Wise, Insights and Practices for Difficult Times. And I ask people who I respect and admire these days how they're staying sane and positive and motivated during these very intense times that we're going through together. And it's a real pleasure and true delight to have with me today one of the people who has inspired me as much as anybody in my adult life, as far as engagement and activism, and coming from a spiritual, heart-based place. And that is Julia Butterfly Hill, who, if you're not familiar with the name, she was the woman who went up to in late '97, wasn't it? Through December '99, and spent 2 years up in a redwood tree, old growth redwood in Northern California, called Luna, to protest and save the logging of the redwoods, and came down transformed and has been transforming people ever since. So she wrote a book called Legacy of Luna, One Makes the Difference, collection of poetry that I have called Becoming, and is not only sharp with an edge, but soft with a deep connection to love. And as I said, one of the more inspiring beings I know. So please say hi, Julia, and I'm so happy to have you here with us.
Hi there. It's so great to be with you in this weird, wild world of technology. It's amazing because you've helped so many people personally, James, in person, and now with this technology, you can help thousands and thousands and thousands of people. That must be so amazing.
May it be so. And just like you often share, it's not us really doing it, but life moving through us. So I am fortunate that I get a platform that people want to hear, the people that I know, and you're one of those. So let's dive in.
Sounds good.
Okay. So we've been, in my mind, going through some pretty strange, bizarre moments and years. Well, you could say decades, perhaps, or millennia. But in this last year, particularly, it's been so chaotic and crazy. And I wonder, I've been asking people, what's your wisest perspective that helps you through these current chaotic, uncertain times, that keeps you from getting lost in fear and despair?
Well, it's interesting because I tell people a lot that I might be one of the biggest cynics that people might ever meet. But I don't let my cynicism stop me. I don't let I feel fear. I don't let my fear stop me. I feel rage and anger because that's my natural response to places and people and animals that I love being decimated. I feel all of these feelings, and they're part of the human experience, but it's what do we choose to do with those feelings or not do that, in my experience, is what makes all the difference. So with what's going on right now, for me, it just feels like it's putting up more than ever before for many, many people. It's putting things right in front of their face in a way that we have to deal with now, because it's affecting people we know. It's affecting places we know. It is, even if it's just the politics in the United States, it's like, it's so egregious at this point that you really can't stick your head in the sand anymore. It's like the winds are blowing all the sand out. There's nowhere left to put the head. And so it's coming up for people. And a lot of my work while living in that tree and going through everything I went through was really about, in myself, learning how to be with what's so, including in myself. Do not try and pretend like something isn't happening, to not pretend like I'm not feeling something, but also to then try and find my way through, and do not allow what's happening and what's so in life or in my head to stop me from doing what's possible when our hearts are willing to break open, when our hearts are willing to crack and grief comes pouring out. It's the containers expanding. And then we have more room, and so right now it's painful. And an automatic reaction is we want to go insular. We want to close in. We want to close down as a self-protective measurement. And yet our world, our earth, our children's future, they need us to be willing to crack open. And then the thing is, though, how do we do that without being consumed? How do we feel the rage and the anger that's a natural response to what we love being hurt and not be consumed by it? Mm. How do we feel the kind of grief that many of us feel, but be able to get out of bed and take on a new day with love and joy and possibility? How do we take on the grief, the fear, all these emotions, and see what there is to learn from them, and then let them go like the river washing away, so that we can show back up and be present. And it's only in that space of being present that we can bring our best selves forward. So I'm cynical. I get angry. I rage. I cry a lot. I'm so sensitive. I'm the kind of person who cries at commercials, it's kind of pathetic. So. But then it's like, okay, now this is what I'm feeling. But what is it that I need to do to work forward? And so I know that the world needs our love more than ever. Our world needs our joy more than ever. And it's hard because not only is there so much that's sad, but sometimes it feels like, well, who am I to have the right to be joyful when so much and so many are suffering? And yet, but our world needs it. And if we're not going to carry it forward, who will? So we find ways to bring our love, to bring our joy, to bring our commitment, to be willing to take risks that we might never have taken before in our life. Because what better time than now?
Mm-hmm. You mentioned about your cynicism, and I'm remembering this line from Michael Lerner. He says, cynics are frustrated idealists. And I think you're the perfect example, but you're not frustrated. Well, you might be frustrated, but your idealism still shines through. That's for sure. And so you asked a number of questions that were going to be my next questions to you when you said, how do we stay connected to all that's good and underneath the anger and the rage? And I know that this is one of the messages that you talk about in such an inspiring way. And if I may, I'm just going to plug a clip of you that I have shared with many, many people on YouTube. If you go to Julia Butterfly Hill, Anger versus Love, or Awakening Joy, because you were at the Joy course, and you have two clips, one Anger versus Love and one Fierce Compassion. But I'd love if you you share a little bit, how do you get from that anger to the love? Say you got activated and it's like you're hitting your head and saying, I can't believe it. How do you go down underneath to that soft spot?
For me, there's kind of like an internal conversation that I have with myself. And so the first tenet is one that's very much alive in the meditation practice, which is take a really long, deep breath and then take another one. You know, and it begins by the calming of the nervous system. And so often in my talks, I talk about this, and I'm like, and to people who aren't involved in meditation, let's say, and saying it's not just about, you know, a spiritual practice, but it's a physiological response as well, that the fight, flight, or freeze mechanism of the nervous system is at the very base of our lungs. And so it's almost like there's a little person down there. And which is why when we take shallow breaths, when we're freaking out, we start taking more shallow breaths, we feel more freaked out. We take more shallow breaths, we feel more freaked out, because we're actually telling that little person at the control unit, it has a right to be freaked out. Whereas when we take a big, long, deep breaths, it's like it massages that little person's shoulders and head and goes, it's okay. Things are intense, but you might not have to run or beat somebody up. There might be another way through this. So just take some deep breaths. And so that's the first thing. And without it, it's not possible to be present when we're triggered. It's like literally physiologically impossible to become present when we're triggered if we do not take those deep breaths and calm the nervous system, because the nervous system reacts to everything that's ever happened to us, that we've ever heard about, the whole thing. And when we get triggered, all of that luggage goes right into this space, and we're just all up in that mess. And so the deep breaths goes, okay, I'm going to move that back a little bit to the past where it belongs, and then I'm going to see what starts to come alive for me in this moment. Because what might have worked for me yesterday might not work today. And what might have worked with another person might not work with the person who's in front of me. You know, life is diverse, and that's what makes it challenging, but that's also what makes it beautiful. So taking the long, deep breath, crucial, first and foremost.
Another thing, if I could just interject, as far as calming down the whole system, that I have found very helpful, and there's a physiological basis for it, is just putting your hand on your heart, which is a technique that mindful self-compassion program uses. That it's been shown that this physiologically releases oxytocin and calms down soothes the whole system. So but I, just as you were talking about it and talking about taking a deep breath, I was doing it internally and getting more relaxed. So
yes,
thanks for reminding me. It's what I do, what I teach, but it's never too much to hear. So then after your deep breath.
Well, the other thing too, the heart one is great, and also a hand on the belly when we're feeling ungrounded. As we take those two breaths, we can put one hand on the heart, one hand on the belly, and do it as well. And the hand on the belly helps ground that energy into the earth and helps remind us that we're being held and supported by this magical earth 24 hours a day. That she is with us every moment of day. She has always been with us. And even if we end up destroying our ability to be here, she's going to keep being here. Her love is unconditional. Her support is unconditional. So breathing into the heart, that remembrance of the love, the breathing into the belly, that being connected with Mother Earth, that in those two spaces alone, in the deep breath, there's so much source, way more than what we hold just up here in our mind. And when we're triggered, we're just up here. And so the deep breaths brings us into our body, touching of the heart. The belly helps connect us to our heart, to earth source. And then from that place, we can become present and choose what's possible. So it does take courage to care in the world today. It just does. It it's important to celebrate that we have the courage to care at a time when we might want to shut down. It's really good to acknowledge in ourselves and others. Thank you for caring when it's hard. I know it hurts, and I'm grateful that you choose to allow your heart to break open instead of shut down. I honor you for that courage, for that strength, for that beauty. And then from there, we say, okay, what is there for me to do right now, you know? And a lot of times for me, it's laughter. It just is. It's like, that's my natural expression. It's also, I think, partly my defense mechanism. But especially when dealing with people or situations that are diametrically opposed and really intense, not laughing at them, that won't work so well. But I find ways to like laugh at myself or bring humor to a situation, and it helps bring that tension down. And when we're laughing, we're listening. When we're listening, we're connected. And from that place, yet again, so much opens up. And then another thing that I know you talk about as well is like, we all have unique gifts. It's like, I've been stubborn and getting into trouble since I was like before 2. I was a terrible 2 before I was 2. And thank goodness I learned how to direct that into good causes. I work a lot with youth. I work a lot with youth in foster care systems and the juvenile detention centers and homeless youth. And a lot of my work with them has been to tell them, you don't need to change who you are. You might need to change your focus. So even things that we think at first might be bad about us, that we might even feel shame around, there's wisdom in those places. There are gifts in those places that are only there, hidden away in those places we might try not to look at or we don't want others to see. And what I found, at least in my work, is that when I'm willing to go there and expose those parts of myself and share it, it makes such a bigger difference than me just being the girl who lived at the top of the tree and did amazing things. And I am that person too, but I'm a person who makes a mess. I'm a person who loses my cool and says stuff I wish I could like, God, I just reel that back in. But when I'm willing to share those things, own those things, there are gifts in there, and they're there for all of us, and we're all unique, and our gifts are important. And there's always something to give. I was raised very, very poor. My father was an itinerant preacher, and we lived off of whatever money people would give us as the offering at the church, like the Donna system. My father was not the big, huge church evangelist. He was like, I remember this church we went to in West Virginia that still had no indoor plumbing. Like, you had to go to an outhouse across the way to use the bathroom.
Wow.
So these churches, even when they gave all that they had, it wasn't a lot. A lot of times it was just enough to put gas in the car to go to the next church. So we lived off of the food that people gave us. We lived off the clothes that people gave us, very, very, very poor. And yet I was taught at a very early age that no matter how little you have, you always have something to give. And before my family started traveling full time, we lived in the slums in Pennsylvania. And nobody who lived there, none of us had money. And we went to the government food banks. We went to bakeries and got day-old bread and things they couldn't sell anymore. We went to grocery stores, did the same. And then we would return back to the basement of our home with other members of the little church my dad started there. And we got bags, and we would separate the food out into all the bags. And then one person in the neighborhood had a truck. And we would load the back of the truck with all these bags, and we drove all over our own neighborhood where none of us had money or food, and gave out bags of food.
Wow.
And, I started doing that when I was not quite 4 years old.
Wow.
So from my earliest memory, that was a part of my life, and it still is huge to who I am. That bringing our love and our joy and our care into service, there is always a way to do it, and it makes life better for everyone, and selfishly first with ourselves, because we realize that we have power, we realize that we can contribute, and we feel a part of something instead of so disconnected, which is what's really at the root of everything that's going on right now.
Mm-hmm. You know, and your book, One Makes the Difference, you really underscore that point, that whatever you can do, and it's one of the messages that that touched me so about what you share. And I love, I often tell the story. You're in a lot of my talks, by the way. Anytime I'm talking about engagement, as Julia says, at the end of your talks, and where you get people so inspired and psyched up, and they come to you and they say, "Oh, Julia, you've inspired me so." And your response is, I'll tell everybody listening, "Oh, that's wonderful. Inspired you to do what?"
Yeah.
And I wonder if you, now I have a chance to just be hanging out with you. What would you say to people who feel that they have they care, and they're in despair, and maybe they even sense they have some gifts, but to overcome the inertia, to actually put yourself in motion? Any secrets that you can share to press that magic button?
It's the oldies but goodies, really. It's like put one foot in front of the other. That's how you start moving. And when I was at the base of that mountain where Luna still stands to this day, the over 1,000-year-old redwood that I lived in, I was looking up that mountain and I thought, oh dear God, what did I just sign up for? I joke that one of the biggest reasons I didn't come down for 2 years is not because of altruism, but because I didn't want to have to climb that damn mountain again.
Whatever keeps you up there.
So I had, this huge backpack on it was nearly 100 pounds. It was crazy. I had stuff like hanging off the sides. It was so heavy. And I was going up this very steep mountain in the winter time, and it's the redwoods, so it's raining. So it's very muddy. And so for every step I take forward, I sink like down a foot. It's like pop my foot out, take the next step kind of thing. And there were so many times I was like, oh dear God, what did I agree to do? And the answer was just right there, 1 foot at a time, Julia. That's how you climb the mountain. But you have to move. You have to show up. And people sometimes too will say, well, I want to do something, but I don't know what to do. Well, just start trying stuff. Don't be afraid to make a mistake. Don't be afraid to fail. I think that's a big thing for a lot of people. I had an extremely low self-esteem growing up, and so I could never admit if I did anything wrong because I felt so terrible about myself. I couldn't admit if I didn't do something right. But now I've learned that I have this great gift that if I screw something up, well, I'm just going to go explore it and be like, wow, why did I mess that up? What didn't work and why? How can I learn from that and apply it the next time? And so I tell people, just like I don't let my fear or my despair stop me, I also don't let the fact that I don't know how to do something stop me from doing it anyway. Like, no one had ever lived in a tree for 2 years and 8 days before. There was no blueprint. And so that it's trite, but it's true. You wanna get into action, do something, whatever it might be. First, I always tell people, start in your daily life. Look at something in your daily life that could shift and be more in alignment with the world, your vision of the world. Whatever that might be, because we like to point fingers at other people. We like to hold politicians accountable. We like to hold corporations accountable. But the foundation of the house is where the integrity is. And we create the foundation in our daily life by our practices. So look around our life, whether it's, reducing energy and water or consuming less, to who are the people that I share my space with? Is there some way that I'm disavowing them or cutting them down or being too hurried and too busy and too stressed to be present, whatever that might be. Is there a shift I could make there? And then go out into the community. There's always elders who need our support. There's children who need our support. There's animals who, there's so much. I've never been to a single community that didn't need something. And so even if you're not sure, like the big thing to take on, just go find something and do it. And then once we start taking those steps, the steps begin to show themselves to us. There's that quote that's been attributed to Goethe, but now there's been question of who really said it all. But it basically says, if at first you can dream it, begin it. Boldness and genius has magic in it. And then it goes on to talk about, and once you do, then all manner of unforeseen forces will begin to show up to support you in the pursuit of that dream. That's
W.H. Murray, the Scottish Himalayan expedition, who has that whole commitment, and then ending with that Goethe quote. Yeah, commitment. Then providence moves to. Yeah, and one quote that another quote of yours that I use is that you just reminded me, as far as making. Not worrying about making mistakes. You say, you know, as long as you're learning, there are no mistakes. That's I've shared that and have taken that for myself many times. There's nothing that that can't be used to further your awakening consciousness. And also the putting yourself in motion, where you have a sense of harnessing all of that frustrated, despairing energy that I love Angeles Arian's line, action absorbs anxiety. It's a way to kind of relieve some of that. So how do you deal, say, with the frustration when you are up against somebody who either thinks very differently from you, or who is mean-spirited and thinks differently from you? And I know that you had to face the head of the lumber company, the president, who was wanting to do you in, and somehow you got in touch with something that was not just meeting his anger and hatred with yours. What would you say to people to somehow turn their frustration and their anger when there's somebody on the other side who is being harmful or causing harm, whether they know it or not?
There's so many layers to this. So one of them is that we have to decide if we'd rather be right or we'd rather be connected. And our passion about being so right about how wrong everything and everyone else is gets in the way a lot of the time of us being able to make any connection. And if we want to heal anything, connection has to be present. So if you just look at it from a purely affective level, it's like we have to get over in that moment about how right we are about how big of a jerk that other person is. Even if we have a massive amount of proof about how right we are and how wrong they are, it's not changing anything. So
I've noticed, yeah.
Say that again?
I said I've noticed.
Yeah. So we have to, that's one of the hardest things. And it's challenging because our love and our care and our passion is kind of mushed in with our inflated ego and sense of self. And so kind of distinguishing them and teasing them apart can be difficult sometimes, because we are identifying with this thing we care about through ourselves. So we're very invested, we're very engaged, we're very involved. And at the same time, it's like, yeah, but if our ego's running the show, it's accidentally creating more disconnect, which is at the root of all this stuff, all the issues. It's the disease of disconnect, all of it. You're disconnected from a person, you can harm them. You're disconnected from the earth, you can hurt it. Even the most conscious and caring among us, we all deal with this disease, and it impacts our choices. And so I had to learn in my life, I had to get really fierce about even my thoughts, because I did so much work in Luna becoming a public person, being very, very careful about what was coming out of here, out of my mouth. But then I started realizing that my thoughts were clear-cutting the crap out of people all the time. And I might be saying the right thing, but my energy and my thoughts were cutting them down before they even had a chance of showing me their own humanity, and maybe together us finding a way through. So that ego, that false ego self, gets really hidden in with that. I mean, let's be honest, it is our ego, but not a negative one, I feel, that does love and care. It's this feeling of that is me, and when that hurts, I hurt. And so the self is really intrinsically engaged in all of this. This false sense of self, though, puts on a mask that looks like altruism, that looks like caring, and yet it's just running amok. And so, oftentimes, like in my work, it's like, oh yeah, Julia, you might be saying the right thing, but your energy is so not clear. And I'm a sensitive person, and so I can sense when other people are saying things to me the right way, but they're really using it to talk down to me. Or they're speaking their truth, but they're really just vomiting all over me. You know?
Graphic. Yeah. So how do you, when you saw your thoughts clear cutting, what was the transformation that got to a deeper, more connected place?
Well, I like to learn lessons the hard way. So it's part of why I share with others in hopes that not everybody has to learn lessons the hard way. And so, my life was on the line. I had loggers trying to kill me. I had helicopter pilots trying to blow me out of the tree. I had really intense, my life was actually on the line. And my false ego stepping in nearly got me killed. I had to find a way to get these people to see me as a human being. And the only way to do that was to see their humanity. And it is lacking in integrity, as well as it is not okay. It's like when you really look at it, it is nasty to be like, that person should see my view and they are wrong and bad and evil and all those things. It's like, why would anyone want to care about what we might think or feel when the energy we're putting out is you're bad and wrong? It doesn't feel good for any of us. And so for me, I got to learn it the hard way of I was in the tree and I was talking down to the loggers down below. Do you know what you're doing? Do you know how much old growth is left? Blah, 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 blah. And it was all right, but all it did was make them hate me more. And so I had to realize that I was just being an arrogant jerk in my thoughts, that just because I climbed 200 feet into the air didn't mean I was any better than them. And I had to get my ego back down where it belonged and bring my heart back down to the earth with them and find another way through it. So to this day, I try to find something meaningful to connect with the person first. If I want them to see my view, I have to find a way to honor some part of their view. This whole Trump presidency has brought up a lot of intense conversations all over the world. And so using that as an example, someone who supported Trump, let's say they're a business person and they were hoping that they'd get some good benefits as a business, then I would say something like, and I have, I've owned a small business in my life. I know how hard it is to be a small business owner. And I can imagine why you would just be grasping at any hope that you might get a little breathing room as a small business owner. So I totally get it. And then I allow myself to feel it and get it. So even if you're not a small business owner, but like find a way to feel what it is like to be a human being struggling in the world today. We all are. And find a way to connect with that, and then find a way through. We don't always change someone's mind, but if we can cause a softening in all of our hearts, we sure need that.
Yes, yeah, that's so beautiful, just to find something that you could connect with in them, so that they don't feel that you're the other or the enemy. I'm finding myself quoting a lot today, and another one that that comes through is the Martin Luther King quote. It says, "You have no moral authority over those who can feel your underlying contempt."
Yes.
It's such a powerful one for me, that somehow humility is a secret weapon, and the humility that's not so much about being small, but about being tapped into something much bigger than yourself and than us, which leads me to another question. So there you were up in Luna for those 2 years, and what I got as part of that transformation is just a connection to the mystery and to the power of life as it moved through the tree and moved through you. And I wonder if you could just say something, since you've been talking about getting beyond that small sense of ego, how we can tap into that larger dimension that can carry us through the hard times.
I know from my own life experience that getting into the other than human constructed world, we call it nature, without technology and doing it regularly is really, really crucial. There's just people don't touch the earth anymore. Like their feet don't ever feel the earth anymore. Their hands don't feel water that's not coming out of a faucet. People don't go lean their backs against trees. There's just like we're so disconnected from this earth, and this earth sources us, and it is our tiny little island spinning around in this great cosmos. And we many people don't hardly even see stars anymore because they live with so much light pollution. Before getting really hurt, I spent a minimum of 10 days a year in the wilderness with no technology, and just going and being and sitting. And many people take things to write on and all of that, but I don't even do that. I just go sit and absorb and just be, instead of trying to turn it into something. Just be with the trees and the water and the birds and the animals running around and everything that's going on, and allow that wisdom to teach me and guide me. And I tell people, if you live in a city and you don't have that chance much, like, go find a tree that's on your street and go minister to it every day. Go bring it an offering every day. Something to say thank you for being there, providing beauty and shade and cleaning up the oxygen. And so go minister. You know, my father was a preacher, and so like this ministry is like to go and to offer love and gratitude. That's what it's really about. And so go offer that, if it's to a tree or a bush somewhere, but do it for the same one over and over. Make it a ritual. Do something ritualistic with it. Take time and pray with it, and have all the people walking by thinking you're a nutso, and like, that's okay. Me and
another tree hugger, huh?
Yeah. In this tree, we got this thing going on. You're fine. You want to come join me? I'll be right here. And it changes people. I've had people do it even in interviews when I first came down from Luna, and I had all this major press, you know, the ABC, NBC, CBS, like all the major news from all over the world coming and interviewing me all the time. I would make the production crew hug trees with me. I'd tell them that I wouldn't do the interview unless they'd hug trees with me.
Oh my goodness! Wow. Probably got their attention.
Yeah. But what was cool is that, you know, we'd be out in a park somewhere and they'd be like all shy and weirded out. I'd be like, just try it. It's like, nobody here knows who you are. You'll be fine. And what was cool is the amount of people who said, wow, that was kind of amazing, or that wasn't as weird as I thought. And so that, again, just like no matter how little we have, we always have something to give. The same is true even if we don't live somewhere where we can get out into wilderness, find something to go have a sacred relationship with, that is a tree, a plant, something. Don't bring your cell phone. Don't bring a thing to write. Just be with it and offer it something. Offer it a gratitude, a flower, a stone, whatever it might be, and keep offering it and keep receiving. And over time, the messages start to come in more and more, because this technology, although it does give us a way to connect, it also disconnects us. Mm-hmm. And as we were talking about earlier, our nervous system is very sensitive. And our nervous system has to start shutting down in order to handle all this stuff coming at us all the time. Mm. And so in order to become in tune with nature, it's a much more subtle communication that can't get through when it's just buzzing all the time. So we have to slow down, take the breaths, return to that peace that happened before we had all this frenetic connection.
Mm-hmm. This is what the Buddha highly recommended. Is his famous line. He says, "There are trees and the roots of trees. Go find one, and find your inner peace."
Yes, I would agree.
Well, one last topic I wanted to ask of you. Another quote that I share all the time of yours. So you really are in a lot of my talks.
I'm blessed and grateful.
Is to do what you do as a joyful responsibility. Mm. And I wonder if you could talk a bit about that, because it just seems to change everything. Instead of the burden of Atlas carrying the world on your shoulders, just talk about that. How do people get in touch with that joyful responsibility?
Mm. We hear responsibility and we do think of it as a burden, right? A lot of the time. But responsibility literally means our ability to respond. And there is such a blessing that we have been given the gift of this one life, and that we have the ability to respond to hatred with love, to respond to fear with courage, to respond to grief with yet more joy and love, that we have this ability to respond. And I had, like many people, I had a pretty traumatic childhood, had a lot of good, but I had a pretty traumatic childhood, and did not have a safe childhood. And as a result of that, I turned into superhero Julia. And but that superhero cape, I learned in my life, is made out of lead. So it's heavy and it's poisonous. And at this time where so many of us who are caring feel the weight of the world, we have to be careful not to put the cape on, because it's made of lead and it is toxic and it will weigh us down. And we have to set that aside and let go of that feeling like it all has to be saved. We or others have to be the one to save it, and rather be like, okay, I have the joyful ability to respond, not a lead cape that I'm strapping on my shoulders. And if we are having this conversation, and the people who are watching it, we're blessed more than many people in the world right now to even have the privilege of having this conversation, and we're not worried about a bomb dropping on us. Most, if not all of us, are not worried where our next meal is going to come from. We're not worried about getting disappeared. A lot of my activism since coming down from Luna has been in countries where people like me get disappeared. Their families never hear from them again. So we have this privilege, this blessing, but we don't want to strap on that heavy toxic cape, but we rather want to say, I have this blessing of my life. What else would I want to do with the gift of this life than to offer it in loving, joyous service to the things that I care about, regardless of the outcome? You and I were chatting about this before this call about that we get really attached to outcomes, and that can be really heavy. And the meditation practice, along with other practices, teach us that if you want to be miserable, be attached.
Yes,
The quickest way to misery is attachment. So like the fast track.
That's what I've been trying to tell people for a long time. Yeah.
So if you want to fast track to misery, be attached. But if you would like to continuously retouch back in with the joy and the mystery and the magic of life, offer your life, offer the blessing, the miracle, the gift of your life and every breath that moves through it. Offer that in loving, joyous service to the things that move you, to the things that you care about. And know that even when the heart breaks or it feels overwhelming or any of those things come, because they do and will continue to come, that what moves us through it is, okay, but I'm still alive. I still have this breath. In this moment, what can I offer? And it's not necessarily that it's always easy, but for me anyway, it's what makes it worthwhile.
And it's also so much more magnetizing. Other people want to join your party rather than going to the to the mopey side, just coming from love and from joy and just doing what you can. And yeah, I think that's one of your gifts particularly. It's like, oh, okay, there can be a real feeling of fulfillment in doing this. And oh, why don't you do it with me?
Yeah. And the problems are easy to talk about. You know, there's no creativity needed to point out what's wrong in the world. There's no brilliance needed to point out what's wrong. There's no skill needed to point out what's wrong. To find and create and embody the solutions, that takes creativity, that takes brilliance, that takes skill. And I like to use Martin Luther King, like Jr., his most famous, all of his speeches are phenomenal. His most famous being, I have a dream. It was not, I have a problem. You know, it's like the speech did not become famous for, I have a problem. White imperialistic folk trying to say that other folk are not as important. No, he said, I have a dream. And he spoke from that place, and it moved the world. And the same is needed now. It doesn't need us to be pointing out the problems. It needs us to hold a bigger vision of what's possible and then start moving into that direction and living into that direction.
Okay, so I thought that was going to be the last question, but I can't resist one more, which is what I've often asked is sharing, if you can get in touch with your most positive vision of possibilities, where we're headed. Cynic that you are.
Yeah, well, you know that. Thank you. The only thing that comes through for me though is like, it's my experience every day. You know, the other day I was at the store and I have this commitment that the person I'm looking at is the person I'm looking at, you know, and I'm looking at them and I'm looking into their eyes. I'm noticing if their shoulders are drooping, if their head is furrowed, or if they look a little more light. I'm asking them how their day is going and then checking in to make sure that the answer they gave me was real and not just a robotic, I'm fine. I'm engaging them in some way, like they are the center of my universe when that's what I'm doing. And people come alive in that. And I can't hold on to my sourpuss self very long when I'm having these magical moments with people. And it's like this young guy at the store, I was talking to him, and I said, you know, how are you doing? And he thought for a second, and then his face just lit up, and he's like, I'm having a great day. And I was like, wow, really? Can you tell me about why you're having a great day? And he thought about it for a minute. He's like, I don't know. It's really nice outside. And so far people have been nice to me. And the funny thing was, it was totally like misty and gray and dreary. Like, nice outside. But what was so fabulous is, like, in that moment, the day became so bright and beautiful. You know, it was dreary as all get out outside, but he didn't know it because he was just in this beautiful moment. And because I make it a point to be with whoever is in front of me and whatever is happening in front of me, my whole day lit up after that. And it was not possible for me to be a sourpuss for the rest of the day. It was just not possible. That young man was like schooling me without even realizing.
What a great feedback loop. You brought it out of him and he brought it out of you.
Oh, yeah. And then people, as I was walking out, other people were grinning and smiling. I wrote about it on my Facebook page. So many people said, oh, my God, now my day has changed. It's like, so that's my vision of the future. It's like what's happening right now and how I show up for it. And my commitment is to show up for it with as much love, much joy, awareness, and learning as I can bring. And he was just a great reminder that even in the most unlikely moments, magic is happening.
Mm-hmm. Lovely. Well, I knew it would be a real treat, and I had a great time. You just lit up my day. So keep on using that that beautiful mouth piece that you have and that beautiful heart, and keep on making a difference. And you inspire all of us. I just dropped my.
It was good. It was good. It was like an exclamation. It was like a symbol.
Yes. Point. Okay. Exclamation mark. Keep it up.
Thank you, James. It's always a joy to be in your presence, even via a screen. Thank you for including me in your conversations.
Thank you very much. Back at you. Bye-bye.
Bye.